right now. So I move that the closed meeting of Town Council be called at an end at 7:24, moved by Councillor Guimond and seconded by Councillor Zant. All those in favor? Carried. Well, I just have a short text to read. It deals with something that has been bothering me for quite a while, dealing with terrorism, of course, and I know that many cities throughout the world have been impacted by terrorist actions, and hopefully um, we'll be able to uh, do away with this type of action that is taken by a group of radical thinkers. This being said, I'd like to address a few words to the people tuning in with regards to this. And hopefully, people will join with us in thinking about all the victims that are victims of terrorist actions, and those also taking part in the Rio Olympic Games. So here goes. Dear citizens, lately, not a month goes by where we must face again the horror of intolerance. Now, the city of Nice, Paris, Brussels, and Orlando are no longer vaunted tourist destinations. Now, when we hear the name of these cities, it is because of terrorist attacks. The victims have this in common. They were having fun, they were dancing, laughing, and enjoying life. Terrorists decided that this is unacceptable and that this style of life needed to be stopped. These events affect us as it affects people like us, children, women, and of all communities. And since Friday, the Rio Olympic Games have been in full swing, and the eyes of everybody on the planet are, are on the Olympic Games. Unfortunately, we're worried for the security of the 10,000 athletes and the thousands of visitors. I would now like us to take a moment to honor the memory of the victims of terrorist attacks for the past month, and I would also like us to send positive energy to Canadian athletes and visitors to the Olympic Games, hoping that they'll come back delighted by their experience. Thank you very much. Nice words, very inspiring words, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much. All right, then. Thank you. Thank you for this moment of silence. Let's go on now to question period. Does anyone have any questions for Town Council? None? Fine. Let's go on now to Council members' items. Let me see. Didier Chouanière is absent tonight because Section 259(1)(c) of the Municipalities Act indicates that a seat of the Town Council becomes absent for a 3-month period. Be it resolved that the Town Council authorizes the absence of Diane Chouanière, Councillor of Ward 8, until 31st of December 2016. Seconded by Councillor Lalonde. All those in favor? Carried then. Thank you. All right. Resolutions concerning infrastructure requirements. Oh, let's go on to consent items. 10.1, adoption of the minutes of the following meetings. All right. Be it resolved that the following items, as identified under the consent items category on the regular meeting agenda, August 8, 2016 be adopted. 10.1 Minutes of the following meetings. A. Committee of the Whole, February the 17th, 2016. B. Committee of the Whole, March 7th, 2016. C. Committee of the Whole, March 21st, 2016. D. Committee of the Whole, April the 4th, 2016. E. Committee of the Whole, April the 18th, 2016. F. Special Committee of the Whole, April 19th, 2016. G. Committee of the Whole, May 2nd, 2016. H. Committee of the Whole, May 16th, 2016. I. Committee of the Whole, June 6th, 2016. J. Regular, June 20th, 2016. And K. Committee of the Whole, June 20th, 2016. 10.2 Receipt of the minutes of the following meetings. A. Heritage Advisory Committee of May the 10th, 2016. B. Committee of Adjustment of May 25th, 2016. C. Public Library Board, June the 10th, 2015. And D. Public Library Board, May 24th, 2016. 10.3 The following recommendations from the Committee of the Whole of June the 20th, 2016. A. Let me see. Yes. A. Resolution to authorize the creation of a contingency budget for the Bear Brook Bridge Replacement Project. B. Resolution to mandate the Infrastructure and Planning Department and the Heritage Advisory Committee to prepare a notice and bylaw to designate the Moulin Park as heritage. Seconded by... I'll second this, Mr. Mayor. Are there any items you'd like to withdraw on an individual basis so that we might discuss them? Let me see here. I'd like to discuss the Dumoulin Park item 10.3. 10.3 sub B. Yes, that's fine. So it will be withdrawn from the red list for individual discussion. All right. Fine. How about the others? Do we have any other consent items to deal with? I don't think so. Let me see here. I don't believe so. I don't believe so either, Mr. Mayor. Let me see. Fine. You're relying too strongly on your computer. Yes. Mr. Mayor, I'm just asking you to vote upon those items that were read under the blanket resolution, save and except item 10.3 sub C. Yes, we can do so. Fine, thank you. So, let's vote on this. All those in favor? Carried then. So consent items have been agreed upon, save and except for that individual item that was withdrawn from the list for further discussion. Very good then. All right. I'm just trying to make. I'm just trying to find myself in this jungle of documents I have here. Bear with me, folks. Bear with me. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. All right. We've now reached all items under section 11, presentation of the 2015 financial statements. All right, presentation of the 2015 financial statements. Do we have to read the resolution beforehand? Be it resolved that the financial statements of the Corporation of the City of Clarence and Rockland for the fiscal year ending the 31st of December 2015 be ratified and accepted as presented. Seconded by Councillor Zant. All those in favor? Any questions? Well, we'll have a presentation. Fine. All right. Yes. Well, now you're giving us our presentation in the month of August. Ought we not have to have this presentation before then? Yes, you ought to have had it beforehand. Well, how come we have it today and not beforehand? Well, you know that you're all aware that we commenced audit of your books, initially scheduled for March, either on the 8th or the 30th, I believe, and we got involved with the municipality, and information was not available, was forthcoming. So we had to leave the premises after a few years, after a few days, should I say, and we delayed that on a couple of occasions until April. So the audit that usually ought to have been performed in March or April was performed in June and July. That's why, because we didn't have the documents in hand. That's the main reason why. Mr. Kehoe, do we have a comment on this, or? Well, welcome. This is your first day back here. Well, go ahead. Go ahead. The floor is yours. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Well, you do have two documents before you. One is the financial statement that I've put before you, that you have in your computers. You've also received a letter that was inserted along with the documents that were the bundle of documents that were forwarded to members of Town Council. We're supposed to take a look at those on the meeting that was held on the 2nd. Well, anyways, I'll have this sent to you by email. I don't have any other copies of this financial. I thought you had this in your document. Well, I believe that we should have these documents on hand before we tackle this. Well, the letter recaps most of the information that needs to be imparted to you. It's not the financial statement along with the auditor's report, but it's supplementary information, if you wish, with regards to the auditor's report. And I can give you the highlights of the auditor's comment. Well, the first page gives us an idea as to the state of the audit. Well, hold on. We can have this gentleman continue on, and if we're not satisfied, once we have the letter in hand, we can I have nothing against the presentation. If we are called upon to vote on something, I want to be given the time to take a look at the document and read it. Now, this is not your fault, of course. I'm just trying to tell members of Town Council that, well, look, if we're not satisfied, if we wish to have more time, then we'll ask for more time and we'll vote upon it in the month of August. Well, go ahead. Once again, then. Thank you. So the status of the audit, well, the audit is completed at about 99%. We still need to receive some documents from your legal counsel, whether there are any cases in litigation or pending litigation. We'll have also a few letters that need to be signed by town administrators. We'll have those signed tomorrow, and you'll note that your financial statement indicates that it is subject to modifications. There are no date with regard to our report because we can't date our report until Town Council ratifies the financial statement. So if Town Council ratifies it tonight or at the next meeting, we have to make sure that there are no events that do occur in between now or the time in which it has been ratified, at which it has been ratified. Now, our independence during the course of the month of March, at one of the meetings we attended, we sent you a letter stating that we are completely independent and we have no conflicts of interest. And there are 5 criteria that determines this. Firstly, we're not shareholders of the Township of Clarence and Rockland. We hold no positions in which decisions are taken with regards to the city of Clarence and Rockland. We have no complete direct interaction between BDO and members of Town Council. We don't economically depend upon the municipality of Clarence and Rockland for our survival. And we haven't offered any direct municipalities or any direct services to the municipality other than auditing services. So we don't have any conflicts of interest. Now, the relative importance with regards to liability is pegged at $675,000. Now, non-adjusted discrepancies now. Now, the relative importance is $675,000. Now, if we come up with mistakes that in our eyes or in the eyes of town administrators are not important enough to correct, and we call those unadjusted discrepancies. We make, of course, administration and members of Town Council aware of those situations. Now, all corrections that needed to be made were made. Now, the only unadjusted discrepancy or mistake and it's reflected in the report I've supplied to you, are those with regards to the accounting principles that were um, enacted 3 years ago. Now, we assessed auditing uh, results after MPACT had sent its um, assessment. Now, MPACT does not necessarily need to assess a property before proceeding to a final audit. Sometimes when a construction is over and done with a particular structure, the owners take possession of a property, let's say as of 1st of August, and MPACT will perform a cursory assessment and will send you a supplementary tax notice, let's say in the month of February next year. So we have to take into account taxes to be paid in between the 1st of August and the end of December for the rest of the properties. Now, of course, in previous years, we did not take that into account, and at the end of 2014, there were approximately $145,000 that had not yet been accounted for. Now, the new accounting principles compel us to take those into account. This is the only unadjusted amount. Now, with regards to pending litigation, you might be involved in some litigation, but not involving any amounts that cannot be covered by your insurance coverage right now. Now, with regards to fraud, you are covered for fraud. Now, town administration has indicated to us that they're not aware of any instances of fraud during the course of the last year. So I'm just asking you in turn if you're aware of any instances of fraud. If you are aware of any instances of fraud, let me know either in a closed meeting session or on a one-to-one basis, but I'd need a confirmation on your part, however, that you're not aware of any fraudulent actions taken. I'm not talking about $2 that might have disappeared here or there, but something important. With regards to internal control mechanisms, there are not major internal control mechanisms to be applied. When we do perform an audit, we rely on certain control mechanisms to justify what we do with your insurance. Now, we're not going to implement any control mechanisms with regards to our accounting principles that need to be applied. There are no important control mechanisms that we noticed needed to be applied or to be called into action. When you were invoicing water and sewer, there were more auditing processes that were implemented, of course. But save and apart from those, there are no control mechanisms in which there are any discrepancies. At the end of our document, we've noted that BDO is available to give you information with regards to the audit principles that we are subjected to when we audit your books. And this is the letter that I'll be forwarding to you tomorrow. I've also alluded to the letter of recommendation, and I can send this letter over to you also. We might have established also maybe 15 or so recommendations. I deem that 3 of those recommendations are quite important that need to be conveyed to you, viva voce, as it were. And the first one is this one. The municipality is in the process of correcting this situation, and that's the assets registry. Now that we're called upon to capitalize and register all municipal assets, of course, that represents a lot of assets to account for, and your register, of course, is not up to date. There are certain discrepancies that we noted in the documents that were handed to us. It's difficult, of course, to pinpoint all those discrepancies. For example, if you revamp a roadway, we have to remove the asset value of the previous layer of asphalt that was laid down. It's difficult to come up with that particular type of information. There's a lot of work then to pinpoint the information that we need with regards to your assets inventory management. Of course, that calls into account everything that we have. Yes, roads, storm sewers, trucks, buildings, takes everything into account that the City of Clarence and Rockland has. There was a list that needed to be addressed, but I believe that throughout the years we lost sight of the one. Mr. Keogh, well, Mr. Mayor, of course, this is the asset management list that this gentleman is referring to, and we intend to put in all of the details that need to be put in at the end of 2016. Now, the second point I'd like to make is this. For the very first year, this year, there's a new accounting principle that calls upon the municipality to make an inventory of all of its properties or and that are unused and make sure that they are sanitary. For example, if you have a library sitting on a property that is contaminated, because it's in use, we don't have to audit it as being an asset. But if certain properties, for example, presented an environmental challenge or problem, for example, those works to determine if there is a problem and costs to remedy the situation and steps to remedy the situation have not been taken, then we can't move any further. So we have to take action on that to be able to take that into account. And the third point, we note that there's a fairly important increase in accounts in tax money receivable. There has been a lot of tax money owed to the municipality for the past 3 years, and we recommend that you work on that to reduce the tax money receivable. Those are the three most important items with regards to the financial statement. And let me start off at page 6. Financial statements for the year. Let me touch upon the highlights. I won't go into the great details. There's a lot of information contained in the financial statements, but let me give you a bit of information that gives you a detail as to discrepancies that we noted. If there's something that you'd like to know in a detailed fashion, ask me, and I'll be able to, and I'll answer if I can. Now, you have 35.7 million income, and that's over and beyond the budgeted forecast. And as I said earlier on, those are supplementary taxes that have not been, let me see, that have not been delineated by impact, that have been accounted. User fees, $11.4 million. Transfer payments, 1.7 million. Provincial transfers, that's over and above the budgeted amount. We had not thought of using the gas tax, tap into that to perform work, and you've made use of that to the tune of $268,000. Now, this amount was made use of, and you'll note that there's an expenditure under roads, roadways and construction. 2.6 million from other municipalities, a cut above the 1.7 million amount last year. That's mostly the amount that you received from the United Counties of Prescott-Russell. You know, the Leros Forest matter that was settled, you received the 1.7 or a certain amount for that. Now, on the other hand, there's a reduction of grants received from the United Counties of Prescott-Russell with regards to daycare centers, approximately $360,000. Now, 1.8 million as compared to $1.4 million last year. Now, this amount concerns a grant that you received that you need to, an amount that needs to be paid to Gold Star. Maybe the province never required that you pay it back, but in any event, this particular amount is reflected in the income. This was the most important amount that was perceived in 2014. With regards to charges, $36.1 million total. With regards to general administration, $3 million as compared to $2,864,000 the year previous. As a part of administrative charges that have been refunded to other departments. This being said, this year, the amount that has been redirected is less than in previous years, so that reflects that other departments will have at times amounts that are not as important, and that's why administrative expenditures are higher. For example, administrative expenditures are weaker this year substantially than previous years. Public safety, $6.3 million as compared to $7.1 million last year. Now, last year, of course, there was an important adjustment of $547,000 that was that was marked down to compensate for potential requests stemming from firefighters that might suffer from cancer, for example. We were told that by authorities that based upon past experiences, and because you have volunteer firefighters, that you might have future claims, and this amount was completely accounted for last year, which increased your expenditures. All right, and there are $145 less in policing costs than last year. Transportation, there's a discrepancy of $268,000, and you tapped into gas tax to perform work in ditches. Recreation and culture, $4.8 million. Social services, families, daycare, $4.8 million. Urban planning, $739,000 for a total amount of $36 million. Other income are those related to capital expenditures. That's why they're not slated under the income title. So you have 562,000 of provincial grants, 456,000 from the United Counties of Prescott Russell. Again, they gave you an amount this year, but specifically earmarked for roadway construction. And other income, $3.2 million, mainly stemming from user fees, development charges, mostly applicable to Caron Street. You have about $1.2 million worth of expenditures stemming from development charges. And with regards now to the Province of Ontario budget, you had an amount of $4.8 million. There was a $2 million amount in the budget that was earmarked for the Bourget sewer system, and you also had, and you didn't receive any grants, and there's also an amount that was earmarked for the repair of Bear Brook Bridge. You've only received $680,000, but because charges have not been incurred yet, this amount has been brought forward to another time. So that leaves you with an excess of $3.3 million that is added onto the surplus of the initial surplus for a total of $131 million. $133 million. That accounts for the surplus. You'll say, well, we have $133 million. No, you don't have $133 million worth of surplus. Now, if we take a look at further on, now this $133 million is broken down into different amounts. Well, you might have stopped right after your comments on the surplus. Well, if I leave you with this impression, that might certainly give rise to problems with your in-house accountants. Let me skip over the first few paragraphs and let me go down to the bottom section. I'd like to eliminate that from the surplus. Now, within the surplus, you have $149 million of unamortized assets. Earlier on, when we talked about amortized assets, that was the net amount after amortization, because your total net asset amount appears on page 17. $229 million in total. Now, amortization has been taken into account during the course of years, so the net amount now is $149 million. You also have assets that have been purchased but have not been yet financed in the amount of $10 million. Administration has told me that this year you'll be contracting a loan to eliminate the major part of this amount. Now, a major part of this $10 million concerns the work, $4.1 million on Caron Street, and then Drouin Street, and then the Cheney Bridge, $1.1 million, and Albert Street, $600,000. Other amounts totaling $10 million, all in all. Social benefits now. Future unfinanced social benefits, WSIB that I alluded to earlier on, it's part and parcel of the total that has been taken into account up to now with regards to the financial statements that are presented to you. A little bit less than 50% is now akin to the claim that is ongoing, that you're required to pay amounts on a monthly basis. The rest is an estimate with regard to future claims that have not yet been settled. Now, long-term borrowing, the total of your long-term debts, close to $20 million. You also have some loans that you contracted, that you obtained for local improvement purposes, taxpayers were not required to pay for that, so you put up collateral, so you have about $4.8 million with regards to that, and you have an unfinanced internal loan also. So from that $133 million, you have to remove $121 million that has already been spent because it's in your net assets, unpaid assets. Now let me go up to the top of the page. You have reserves, $1.7 million worth of reserves. Reserve funds, $658,000 for water and sewer. Your total of reserves is $7.8 million. So surplus really amounts to $1.6 million. Let me skip the first line. You have specific surpluses with regards to library, $34,000, sewer system, $931,000, waste collection management. So there's a surplus this year of $963,000 all in all. From this amount, there's the $1.1 million that you had received this year from the United Counties of Prescott Russell that has been attributed to that amount. Following my discussion with Robert, this amount will have to be pegged under the fund. So you'll probably wind up with a light deficit. Well, the La Rose Forest amount will fall under that fiscal umbrella. That's right. It ought to have been put under reserve funds. So it will be put under reserve funds for previous years. We haven't lost the 1.1 amount, $1.1 million, you see. You've wound up finally with a $135,000 deficit. That's it. Any questions on this section or anything I've stated previously? Any questions? Councillor Lalonde, I'd like to address your third point, the third point you raised, unpaid taxes. Now, I note here that the amount increased by some $200,000 as compared to the last year. I'd like to have your professional opinion. Given the size of Clarence and Rocklands municipality, what should approximately be, if let's say, what would be a tolerable amount that would be called upon to tolerate? What would be acceptable, given the size of Clarence and Rockland, that we could tolerate with regards to unpaid taxes? As it is right now, this is tantamount to approximately 10% of our annual budget. We're talking about when we talk about unpaid taxes. Well, the $17 million worth of taxes that appears at the end of your financial statements, and you also have school board taxes and your United Counties of Prescott and Russell taxes also that are not taken into account at this point. That's another $17 million amount. So $34 million all in all. This being said, so given the $3.7 million that we're still claiming for back taxes, there's a major part of this is money that we were called upon to pay to the United Counties and to school boards without having it in hand. That's right. We gave out money. We paid for them without having it. Well, 60% of that amount has been given up to now. Now, this amount, given this amount, because you say this worries you, and it's of concern to me also, and we've mentioned to council, we've mentioned on many occasions that this needs to be readjusted. What would be a more acceptable figure? Well, I would rather think that a 5% rather than a 10% figure with regards to uncollected taxes might be more acceptable. I see. What worries me a bit more is this. There are many unpaid taxes that have remained unpaid for 3 years or more. Let me give you an example. Let's say a municipality might have 15 or 25 unpaid individual tax amounts. And they might take legal procedures, and after about 4 years, they might be given a power of sale. But I figure that there are much more properties that are delinquent in their payment for 3 years and more over and above that particular stated amount you see it. See, the old rules stated, well, up to 10%, we can still tolerate, but you're just at that particular tolerable limit. Well, we did hire extra staff to take a look at the budget, and extra staff is getting trained up, and we should see some progress there. Now, Mr. Levesque mentions property taxes that are lagging 3 years or over. We do have the ability under the Act, the Municipal Act, to move on those properties in terms of property sales. That's a discussion we can have another time. It's a very big decision that council will have to make. I'm not necessarily recommending that, but that's certainly something that we can discuss at future council meetings because our amounts of over 3 years are just over 800,000, 8.5. Mr. Zant, have have we ever waived? Well, have we ever done that before, Mrs. Collier? I don't think so. I don't think we ever waived our. Well, look, I have confirmed with Mrs. Normand that we've never resorted to a power of sale. I just want to say, you see, that the approach of previous administrations was to let taxes go in arrears to earn interest on the accounts. So we would eventually get the money once the property was sold. But that was the approach that was chosen by previous municipalities, previous administrations, excuse me. And so now it's catching up with us. Well, given your experience, are there many municipalities that have resorted to the power of sale solution? I would say the majority of municipalities have done so. But they don't resort to power of sale automatically, of course. They'll send a legal letter, and quite often when someone receives a legal letter, legal notice, they'll move on unpaid taxes. I believe that with an additional employee that we've hired that takes care of this particular matter, we'll have to wait and see what the results are once this employee becomes fully functional. Councillor Lalonde, can we proceed to put up a property can we put up a property for sale immediately after 3 years? Well, procedures can be taken after 3 years, but correct me if I'm wrong, but if an individual makes a payment within the 3 years, $20 or $30, we start off at zero. Well, given my experience, you send a legal letter to an individual stating, let's say, if you don't take an arrangement as of the 15th of July, then we'll start, sales proceedings. And they might come up with an agreement with you to pay so much per month. Mr. Kehoe, I can give you an example with regards to water taxes. When we invoice people for water rates or water taxes, we phone people one or two times, and after the third call, approximately 95% of individuals do pay their bill. This is something that we can look into during the course of a year. There's a lot of energy that we need to put into collecting unpaid taxes, but we'll come back to council. So we really have to wait 3 years before sending a legal letter? Well, yes, stating that, legal procedures, will take legal action against someone. But of course, we can send them letters asking them to pay. They can do so, but if they don't do anything, well, if we send them legal notice after a year or 2 years in arrear, I think people will move even more. I don't believe that you can do so within the parameters of the law as it exists right now. Well, what we do right now is that we invoice individuals with interest rates of approximately 2% tacked on a monthly basis. That amounts to about 15% maximum rounded out over a year. And this is interest that the City of Clarendon Rockland will obtain. And these interest amounts that are quite high will be received by the municipality. So this is a revenue. This is that we'll receive in the future. The amount is fairly sizable as things stand right now, and we need to pressure individuals so that they pay the amount payable. But this interest amount is funneled to this town. But I'd rather have 100% of tax arrears rather than a reduced amount. Well, 10% of our annual budget is logged under, accounts receivable. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Kehoe. We're trying to spin this in obtaining interest. Well, what The province also compels us to do this. So the person that we're hiring right now, will it be called upon to tackle arrears? Yes, and will report to council? Yes. Now, it's well and nice to charge 2% per month, but this amount owing compels us to borrow money from the bank to offset the discrepancy there, to offset the shortfall. Yes. Any other questions? If there are no other questions, let me cap off my presentation by looking at the figures on page 5. So with regards to liquidated assets, you have about $7.1 million worth of liquidated assets. You have good liquidity, even though your accounts receivable are quite high, is that you have a lot of reserve fund money. You have approximately $7 million worth of reserve funds. This is money that previous administrations have decided to set aside that does absorb the amount generated by, tax money to be received, taxes in arrears. Uh, of course, development charges, $1.2 million with regards to sewer, $1.9 million with regards to other amounts, accounts receivable, that was decreased substantially from previous years. You had a grant amount that the province, $648,000 that you received. Why did it decrease? Well, it's because of the grant that we received, $680,000 that we received from the province, to cover those costs incurred with regards to the sportsplex. All right, well, that's fine. Now, long-term liability goes from 8 to 5, and that is directly attributable to the renegotiation, the agreement that you entered into with CIH. So the amount receivable went from 4.4 million to about 2.8 million dollars or something like that. That's the amount. Well, Mr. Mayor, another report will be forwarded to Town Council next month with regard to the date that they're called upon to pay, to offset what they owe to the City of Clarence and Rockland. So you have $18.8 million with regards to assets and liabilities. You have suppliers, $8.7 million, and short-term liabilities, deposits with regards to construction permits, commercial developments, and so on and so forth. $4,551,000. Decrease represents the development charges that were tapped into for Caron Street works. Long-term borrowings, you didn't borrow anything during the course of the year, and you reimbursed practically $1.3 million up to now. So $20 million with regards to long-term debt loans. So assets, $1.4 million. You've expended about $8.8 million with regards to assets and amortization. So unfinanced assets, $149 million, opposite the 133 income. Any questions on your financial statements? Thank you. Good job, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I have a good question for you. Firstly, thank you very much for your presentation. I do have a question for town administration here. Tonight, you've been asked to receive and adopt a document that prevents me from asking an intelligent question because I need more than 2 minutes to read this. And I find this unbearable that this situation arises each and every time that we are called upon to tackle similar type documents. Can we please, bring about a change as to the way in which we do things? I'm just fed up. I'm fed up. Well, I will explain to you, sir. Well, we did not receive this document until today. We had a draft document submitted to us midweek last week, and I did not want to send you a draft document. There were still questions as to what the surplus was. We received the document today, and that's why you received it today. Well, we received it today. We should have received it today, but not even voted on it. Well, sir, you were presented what you were presented with by Mr. Levesque tonight. All we need to do is take a look at this, and we'll vote upon this on the 22nd. It'll give us 2 additional weeks to take a look at it. It was too late to turn back the presentation date. It was pegged for tonight. That's why we received those documents tonight. I didn't have them in hand until tonight. Councillor Lalonde. The resolution says to be accepted as presented. The resolution should read be received and not accepted as presented. Well, we're not compelled to vote on this tonight, you know. We can delay a final vote on this matter 2 weeks from now. Give us ample time to take a look at the documents involved. We might ask we can just change the wording of the resolution. We can do so. I believe, Mr. Simoneau, if you're amenable to modification of the wording, that's fine. Let's not, by the way, I understand that what Mr. Simoneau is saying. I'm in agreement with Mr. Simoneau saying that this happens quite often. You know, we might receive documents at the very, very last minute calling upon us to take very important decisions. So we don't have the time to, properly go through those documents. So let's just forget item 11.1, financial statements from now, and let's tackle this in 2 weeks from now because we still have documents to take a look at. Yes, we could vote to receive this particular document, and well, I'm going to speak specifically to this item because it has been a very difficult item to get onto the council agenda. And we had a requirement, as you know, on July the 28th, to renew a loan. And one of the requirements of the financial institution was to have our financial statements approved. So we left it on the agenda tonight. We were supposed to have funding documents last week. We did not receive them. Otherwise, you would have received them in your package. It was too late to pull it back from the agenda at that point. That's why. Well, could we not just modify the agenda tonight, saying let's just remove item 11.1 because we just received it tonight? Well, fine. We also have the power to say, well, no, we're not going to approve it tonight. If we're not comfortable with something, the onus is upon us to say, well, let's delay final decision on this for the next meeting. Message received otherwise. Well, fine. So, I'm sorry? Is it necessary that Mr. Levesque be available for us on the 22nd if we have further discussions or questions with regards to the financial statements? Well, we can forward our documents to town administration. Well, if we want to come up with a final vote on this as of the 22nd, Mr. Levesque might have answers to any of the questions we might have. Well, if we do have any questions, they might be asked of this individual on the 22nd. I don't mind. Or if we don't even have all answers, we can even delay it further. Well, Mrs. Collier told me that given the extent of the law right now, given the state of the law, we have to approve this as quickly as possible. And I would like that the individual that prepared the report be made available to us during the time in which we'll be taking a final vote on this. Well, I'd be available on the 22nd, sir, but let me tell you one thing. This particular report, in theory, yes, we had occasion to prepare. But supposedly, this is the town administrator's report, and we issued an auditor's report given the information that we received from town administration. Now, town administration should be called upon to supply readily information to the auditors. The first letter that I handed you summarizes the work that I've performed, but I have no objection to attend on the 22nd. Well, I'd appreciate that you would attend on the 22nd because we haven't received the first letter that you alluded to earlier on. Everyone would be satisfied if you were here, and we might have all answers that we need to obtain next time around. So thank you very much then. All right, so we'll defer final action on this until the next meeting. Well, that's fine. Councillor Grimard? Yes, I move that this be so. All those in favor then, carry. Yes, all right then. Request for an exemption to the noise bylaw. That's the next item. Well, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to withdraw my request for an exemption to the noise bylaw because I really do not have the applicable date in hand. So I'm going to take necessary steps to pinpoint the exact date in which I need an exemption to the noise bylaw, and I'll come back to town administration and to the town council. We might just read it, though. Mr. Grimald, do you wish to read this? If you wish me to do so, be it resolved that town council give an exemption with regards to the noise bylaw, number 1999-55, Mr. Rémy Beaulieu, 303 Baseline Road in Rockland, to allow a night celebration of marriage ceremony on Saturday, 20th of August, 2016, until the 1 o'clock in the morning, the following Sunday morning, and the town council reserve the right to revoke this exemption at any time. Seconded by Councillor Zant. Yes, Councillor Grimald. Well, why such a simple request needs to be deliberated by council as a whole? You know, is it that the bylaw prescribes that this be done? This minor item should not be discussed by town council. You know, people organizing a marriage ceremony are just asking for an exemption to the noise bylaw for a few hours. Well, we can vote on this at this point in time. Well, I'll have to come back with a revised motion until I get, well, we can decide that, our bylaw enforcement officers or the department take a look at what's what on this. I'm not aware as to the steps that we need to take. Well, Mr. Mayor, the bylaw states that an individual can make an application to council for an exemption. That's how the bylaw is written. So that's how the bylaw. Well, can I modify this resolution to reflect the fact that this bylaw will be modified at the next meeting, and that matters of this nature be brought to administration rather than council as a whole? Is everyone in favor of this? Because we'd like to know what's going on quite more often than not, I think, with regards to noise exemption requests. I don't mind that we leave this to town administration. But, well, an example here, Mr. Mayor, there's a marathon being run throughout Rockland. We don't enact a resolution. We just send the bylaw enforcement officers to make sure that things are respected. Well, I'd like to modify the resolution to reflect that from this time on, henceforth, all requests with regards to noise bylaw exemptions be forwarded to town administration. Mrs. Ouellette, well, a resolution should be drawn up to reflect that town administration come up with a policy that would reflect this, what you're voting on tonight. And then we can vote on that policy. Well, that's fine. All right, then. All right. Moved by Councillor Guillemard and seconded by Councillor Lalonde. All those in favor? Carried, then. Thank you. Let's go on, shall we, folks, to next item, tax reduction under sections 357 and 358 of the Municipal Act. I just had a tad bit of a question here from the communication standpoint. The amendment to the resolution, do you want this to be tackled at the Committee of the Whole meeting? Well, no, we'll settle this directly at the regular meeting of Town Council. Everyone's involved in this. Let's go on now to the next item, tax reduction under sections 357 and 358 of the Municipal Act. Be it resolved that Town Council of the City of Clarence and Rockland approve tax reductions in the amount of $9,104,000. Yes, $104,000, yes. With regards to sections made under sections 357 and 358 of the Municipal Act, and with regard to subject property as recommended in the report FIN 2016-13. Seconded by Councillor Lalonde. André, any questions? Mr. Mayor, haven't we discussed this beforehand? Well, this comes back once in every year. Well, property 147, I took a look at where this property is located. Well, see, different properties come into play each and every year, so that's why this comes before council each and every year. What you're wondering about here, Mr. Lalonde, reflects the fact that we didn't have the addresses for all properties involved. Mr. Keogh is not in attendance. These are taxes that are written off, right? These are properties for which tax accounts have been written off. Are we talking about tax adjustments here, Mrs. Collier? Well, it's an adjustment and the writing off of taxes that are still owed. Those are homes that have been demolished on certain properties. There are no standing buildings on those particular properties anymore. There was one that had a $146,000 assessed value. This particular property is owned now by the French Language Public School Board. That's the property that's located right beside the Le Temps Street property, or the Le Temps Street venue. I see. Now, so that people be made to understand what we're discussing about. There are two components to this. There's tax reduction, and then secondly, there's a tax write-off because buildings are not standing on this property anymore. They've been torn down. Fine. All right then. Confirmatory to a bylaw. Be it resolved that the City of Clarence, Rockland Town Council adopt a bylaw 2016-111, being a bylaw confirmatory bylaw for the regular meeting of Town Council held on the 8th of August 2016, seconded by Councillor André Lalonde. Any questions? All right then, all those in favor? Carried then, thank you. Regular meeting of council is now closed at 8:20 p.m. Is called to a close at 8:20 p.m. Is that too early, ma'am? Let's take a few minutes then. We'll tackle the committee of the whole meeting afterwards. Thank you.